Hey, welcome back to the Mining Pod. Colin, guess what? Trump's tweeting about Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, the white paper day. Orange man likes orange coin. There was an interesting report, I think, that I saw from someone from Paradigm. I don't know what the research was, but it was suggesting that 5% of voters say that like crypto is a single issue for them.
Ooh.
Which seems kind of high to me. I honestly can't, like, it's not a single issue for me, and I like work in Bitcoin. But that is interesting. People are saying maybe that's enough to tip scales in certain swing states. Who knows?
Said, I would like to wish our great Bitcoiners a happy 16th anniversary of Satoshi's white paper. We will end Kamala's war on crypto, and Bitcoin will be made in the USA. Vote Trump. Hashtag Bitcoin. Hashtag Free Ross Day 1.
Did he do the hashtag Free Ross?
Yeah.
So like Barron Trump on his social media team confirmed or something. None of that is an original thought from the Donald. I mean, you know, there's no way that anyone but a staffer was like, you got to put Free Ross in there.
Incredible. Okay, so we are jumping on the horn. Let's go talk. Let's go get a word from our sponsors. But afterwards, we'll be going through Bitcoin and mining news. This is your news roundup. See you on the other side.
Are you a retail or institutional investor interested in Bitcoin mining companies? The Miner Mag brings you free data and analysis from all major NASDAQ-listed Bitcoin mining operations to know who stands out. Check out visualized metrics and data-dependent stories at theminermag.com. Thanks for listening to The Mining Pod. Want more? Subscribe to our main feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts for another weekly show on Bitcoin stocks. And check out our newsletter at miningpod.blockspace.media today.
Okay, Colin, we have our difficulty update. Matt's not here today, so I'm going to be the lowly intern for it and try to do my best.
He's still reeling after Texas has lost to Georgia, so he's not showing up.
Then we're going to go through a Hashrate arms race, an amazing newsletter that you put together this week for the Mining Pod newsletter, and we'll add some stuff from, I think CNBC had a clip relating to this. Then we're going to go over to Seneca Lake, talk about Greenidge, then TSMC and the report with Bitmain. And we have one story to finish up with, which is your home state of Tennessee and Bitcoin mining.
A wonderful cry corner, intersection of salty journalist and TVA.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite things.
It's a good story. So we'll dive into that at the very end. But let's start with our difficulty update. I'm now sharing it on the screen. So if you're listening on the CoinDesk Podcast Network or just on the Mining Pod feed, you cannot see this, which is sad. But if you're watching on CoinDesk TV or our YouTube channel, you can see mempool.space, our favorite block explorer out there. And difficulty is estimated to go up 7.84% in about 3 days. That's pretty brutal. We're already at 95.67 trillion difficulty. For those who don't know what difficulty is, it's a self-measurement of the Bitcoin network itself, sort of like, Colin, I'm actually pulling this from you. It's kind of like how Google has its own self-measuring rank scores for SEO. So it's sort of an internal system. But we're going to get to the 100 trillion club pretty soon with Bitcoin difficulty, which is crazy. And then hash rate is at 750 exahash. And we're going to pop to 800 soon.
Did we hit another all-time high?
It's only up and to the right at the moment.
That is crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, so the 7-day, it's at 756. Hash price had a nice little bump after the Memento, or concurrent with the Memento Mori mint for Casey Rodamore's runes. Runes.
If that made no sense to you, go check out Bitcoin Season 2.
Yeah, go check out our boy Charlie Spears. He's got all the deets on that. I don't really understand it. I try not to. But just a mammoth update for the difficulty coming up. I mean, hash rate is coming on at a rapid clip. And like you said, it's up and to the right. Doesn't seem signs of slowing. And in fact, that's why it was the focus of our newsletter for the Mining Pod this week. Because it hit an all-time high last week, and now we're at another all-time high shortly after us publishing that newsletter.
So we'll go to that in a second. The last that I have on hash rate is like last week went up, or a week and a half ago now, went up 3.84%, almost 4%. Now it's going to go up almost 8% 3 days out. Could change a little bit. That's a lot of hash rate being added to the network post-halving. It seems that if you look at the prior halvings that we've had, that we're following a very similar pattern where right after the halving and leading up to the halving, you see a lot of hardware come offline. And we see it drop as private miners. In this instance, public miners were able to add more hash rate, but private miners certainly were dropping off the network and consolidating or turning off for a little bit. And now we're seeing just the hash rate pile back on just as Bitcoin price is starting to rip. I don't like to believe in the cyclicality of these things and that history just keeps repeating and that it's deterministic, but it seems to be deterministic that hash rate will pile on, Bitcoin price will go up, and we go into a glorious bull run. And, that's odd. We don't talk about price on the show too much because we're not price pumpers. But there's something to hash rate popping right now, which is making me like a little more optimistic than I was, say, 3 months ago. Even though this is bad for hash price, right? It's still making me a little happy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it shows that the death of the mining industry was greatly overstated after the halving. It also shows the fact that all of these new, these next gen models are going to give people more comfortable margins, because that's where all of this is coming from, right? Which we covered in Wednesday's newsletter. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
So yeah, for this week's newsletter, I wanted to examine exactly what's leading to the all-time high. Obviously, more hash rates coming online, duh. But where exactly is it coming online, and what other trends are we seeing? So I talked to a couple of miners in the space, namely Ethan Vera, CEO of Luxor, Yaron Melarud, co-founder of Hash Labs, and another miner who's active with a partner in a research group currently named Denis Rusinovich, who has a lot of connections in Russia. And the TLDR was, a lot of this is coming online in the US. Specifically, public miners are deploying next generation machines at a rapid clip. S21 series, M60 series coming online with all of your favorite big industrial miners. As you can see right here, since July, their collective hash rate, at least for the top 12 public miners, is up 19% to 189 exahashes a second. That's nameplate. That doesn't necessarily mean full utilization. As we saw on the Riot live stream yesterday, nameplate hash rate versus utilization are often quite different. But so the US is currently leading the charge in the expansion of hash rate. But behind them, I would say close behind, but I don't think it's that close, are Russia and China. So we have gotten reports from a number of our sources that Russian miners are making up the bulk of ASIC orders for certain brokers. Obviously, none of these brokers are US brokers. Sanctions bar them from being active in that market. But any of the brokers that are active in Russia, Dennis told me that about 50% of their business is coming from Russia. After I published this newsletter, Yaron came back to me and said that their head of brokerage at Hash Labs was saying that they are seeing significant volumes in Russia. And also looking further east, China is not out of the race. They are still deploying hash rate. There are still some ASIC manufacturing facilities in China where they're getting new gen and next gen machines, I would imagine. And volumes are picking up there significantly, perhaps for the first time since the China mining ban. But that's one thing that Ethan pointed out, was that there seems to be a decent amount of activity bubbling up over there now. Things are starting to they're not easing restrictions, they're not reversing bans, but it does seem that certain provinces, certain privileged miners are starting to deploy hash rate again. And just a few more figures from that newsletter. Ethan Vera estimated, based on their business intelligence at Luxor, that 60 to 80% of all hash rate in the world resides in the borders of US, Russia, and China collectively. Few other things there. They estimate that Yaron Melarud estimated that about 3% of hash rate is currently in Ethiopia. So that would be the largest mining market in Africa. About 600 to 650 megawatts of hash rate or of energy capacity there is going towards mining. A lot of those machines are old gen machines or older machines that have been recycled or cycled to the global south now that they're no longer profitable in places like the US and Canada. So seems like Ethiopia on the come up. Currently, Bitcoin mining in Paraguay is hitting a bit of a ceiling. Regulators at Andy, which is their power authority, are no longer issuing new power blocks. There's been a lot of cowboy mining over there where guys are just coming in and plugging in and paying as they go and not setting up PPAs with Andy. So they didn't like that. They've kind of frozen that. So currently it looks like opportunities there are kind of stagnating. But that's kind of everything we went through in the newsletter. There's a few other points, so I recommend y'all go read it and also subscribe to the newsletter for analysis like that every week.
Yeah, what are you doing if you're not subscribing? Let's take a quick look at this video really quickly, which ties into the conversation.
Yeah, it's a non-U.S. asset. It's an emerging markets asset. And while we were all hyperventilating about the election over the last week, BRICS had a conference in Russia. There's 6 new members of BRICS this year. So BRICS GDP is now greater than the combined GDP of G7. Of the 6 new members, 3 of them, Argentina, the UAE, and Ethiopia, are now mining Bitcoin with government resources. So there is tremendous urgency outside of the U.S. to find a way to circumvent the irresponsible fiscal policy that we've been running here in the U.S. In fact, Russia announced an initiative. Their sovereign wealth fund is going to invest in a regional initiative to build Bitcoin mining and AI infrastructure throughout BRICS with an idea of settling global trade in Bitcoin. So look, someday, I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, Putin's going to die. We're going to look to reintegrate some of these countries into the world financial system, and they're going to be trading with Bitcoin. What are we going to be doing?
Wow.
I hope we're all trading with Bitcoin.
That was... I don't know who that is at VanEck, so I apologize if you're listening to this, but one of VanEck's, higher level guys talking about that. So a few kind of bombshells there. We know that the UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund is involved in Bitcoin mining, so that's not really a surprise. But as far as I know, I have not seen any news broken on Argentina and Ethiopia, specifically government officials there mining Bitcoin. So I'm sure that that's right. But that's an interesting thread for us to pluck, and maybe we can do some investigating into that. And just one more thing to say on that. So with regards to the BRICS nations, that's also another very interesting point. So BRICS is a coalition of a handful of nations. It started as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's expanded to a few others like UAE, I suppose, and a few other nations. And he just said there that their GDP now supersedes G7 countries, which are like, the United States, Great Britain, Japan, Germany, this coalition that the BRICS is kind of, diametrically opposed to in some ways geopolitically. And that's an incredible stat. Now, a lot of that is coming from China. But this is something that Dennis also pointed out in my newsletter. He said that, the investments that you're seeing in Russia are going to spill over into these other BRICS nations. And also, he expects Russian miners to go public next year. The liquidity for those public offerings is going to come from Russia and other BRICS nations who are not barred from investing in those companies. So this will be interesting to watch over the next coming years. Again, it kind of plays into my thesis that I think you'll see the U.S. I think we've seen the U.S.'s hash rate dominance peak. And if we're not at the zenith, I think that we'll hit it soon. And I don't think that we'll have as much share of the hash rate after this halving epoch as we currently have. So.
I mean, I saw a lot of takes on Twitter about this. I'll leave most of the deranged comments for Twitter. I think that these stories are normally overblown in their importance right now. The podcast we just did with Ethan and Cal on Ethiopia, like they're actually going to mines, right? And like, yes, it's growing. Yes, it's going to become a large percent of the grid. It already is. They're trying to get to 15 gigawatts on the grid, and they have about 650 megawatts right now on the ground. So if you take a lower estimate of what's actually developed gigawatt-wise, it's already a large percentage of Ethiopia's grid is Bitcoin mining. But we haven't really seen yet Bitcoin mining and the use of Bitcoin mining move into the banking sphere. Just because you operate Bitcoin's mines doesn't mean that you're using Bitcoin for international trade and settlement. We need to see far larger volumes, far better rails developed. The custodian solutions are mostly in the US, right? The Fireblocks of the world reside in the US. They don't reside outside the US. There's certainly ways of doing it. Like you don't need a custodian to use Bitcoin, obviously, but like these countries are going to want that. So I think we're quite a while away. And I think like people getting excited about Bitcoin mining and thinking that we have hyper Bitcoinization because mining is being implemented. It's two very, very different things.
Yeah, it is. And you're going to need volatility to smooth out before any of these nations actually use it as a vessel for trade, right? I mean, maybe you're using the network as a payment rail, kind of like Strike does with its wallets, but like otherwise you're going to need something to make them think that they're not going to buy a barrel of oil and then that, their income or like, the seller, like Russia, is going to have the income from that be cut in half overnight. One last thing on Russia, because I want to address it because reports just kind of dropped yesterday after we put that newsletter out. Certain Russian provinces allegedly are restricting the practice of mining currently because of energy shortfalls. This was something that came up with both Yaron and Dennis in my conversation. And it kind of speaks to the difficulty in getting accurate information here, because there are still plenty of imports of ASICs coming into Russia. A lot of those are probably going to upgrading existing sites. But it seems like right now, certain regions will have growth capped for the time being. And I'll be keeping an eye on that. I'm going to follow up with Dennis to see if he has thoughts on that. Because also, we've seen these things before, and sometimes the reports are not true. Because it's like some journalist taking a Russian article and doing Google Translate, and then something's lost in translation, or they don't understand the regulatory environment, things like that.
Thankfully for our listeners, we are experts in Russian history, so you guys are all safe with us.
In the competitive world of Bitcoin mining, one name stands out: CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner. At CleanSpark, efficiency isn't just a goal, it's our standard. Our sophisticated facilities are built and led by expert teams who care about Bitcoin and the communities we work in. Scale? We've mastered it. Our large-scale operations have set us apart in the industry as examples of community-oriented building. Our track record speaks for itself. We navigate the complexities of the new economy with precision and with skill, continuously achieving operational milestones. Curious about how we do it? We invite you to discover the story behind CleanSpark's success at cleanspark.com.
Let us move to a different part of the world with archaic laws, and that would be the great state of New York, and talk about Seneca Lake and Greenidge. So this story has been going on for the better part of 3 years. I think most Bitcoiners know about it, the infamous Seneca Lake, where the press decided that Seneca Lake was being boiled alive by the smokestacks of Greenidge, the Bitcoin miner up in the area. According to the Miner Mag, New York judge to rule on Greenidge's Bitcoin mining permit by November 14th. So this is just a small update we want to keep everyone in the loop on. Essentially, Greenidge has been going back and forth with the state of New York, one of their environmental departments, trying to get permitting to continue to be able to mine there. They've gone through the court process with the state of New York twice now, and they've been shot down twice, and they're going for a third time. And this update basically says they have until the 14th of November to be able to continue mining, and then they'll have to shut off, or they were going to have to shut off in September, and then they filed a new thing, some sort of deep petition that I won't pretend to know about, and that allowed them to continue mining. And they're waiting on a little bit more information from the courts before sort of either moving on or perhaps being able to continue to mine Bitcoin after the moratorium pauses. It's a little bit unclear. The reason we brought this story, given like the lack of information around it, is the moratorium specifically. Like that's going to lapse, or it's supposed to lapse in a few days here. Well, I guess it's the 31st as of recording. So it's supposed to lapse next month, November, tomorrow, someday next month, I should say. And that's big news for Bitcoin miners in that area. As noted in the podcast with Foundry the other day, Foundry is expecting that this moratorium will be extended somehow. There's going to be a new report on the environmental side from another agency in New York State that says like Bitcoin mining is good or bad. Foundry is expecting that to not go in their favor or in Bitcoin mining favor. So they're getting ready to fight any extension of a moratorium. But let's be real, like New York State is not going to really back down into bureaucracy through and through. And
no, and the moratorium is so funny because it was specifically on fossil fuel based mining.
Yes.
So if you have renewable energy, which New York does not have, I would imagine very solar panels. I don't think last time I looked at the numbers, it does. Wind, maybe some, basically no nuclear. So you basically have Niagara Falls energy, and that's basically it. So, Hut 8's got a facility and I think near Buffalo.
Yeah.
So those miners are fine. And the ones who are using fossil fuels were grandfathered in. I just want to point out, though, I think the moratorium is hilarious because I'm pretty sure it's either New Jersey or parts of New York, which, like Newark, it might as well be New York. New Jersey might as well be New York City. That's my flyover countryman opinion of the coast. But it's one of the only areas where oil, like straight up like oil, still makes up a significant sliver of their energy production. So like they're one of the Northeast is still one of the only areas that burns oil to produce electricity in this country, which I just think is hilarious. Obviously clear double standards here. And not really much to add to the Greenidge case. I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Who knows whether or not there are legitimate concerns here. I mean, they're worried about air quality from their facilities. All of this seems to get so political.
Yeah.
But, sometimes like miners, we have to be careful because, there are legitimate things like noise complaints where miners have not dampened noise pollution enough. And, it actually affects communities. And then there are ridiculous stories like the one coming out about Marathon's Granbury, Texas facility where people like 10 miles away are saying that they have headaches and fatigue because of Bitcoin miners, right? So
yeah, my dog has cancer from Bitcoin mining. No, we are an industry publication, but we do like to keep the record straight here. Speaking of which, let us go over to this TSMC story, which I think needs a lot of hand-holding to get us through it.
Yeah.
Colin, I hand it to you.
Kicking up a lot of scuttlebutt and dirt from the story. I mean, people are starting to speculate and rumors are swirling that Bitmain is going to be subject to sanctions, basically because of these reports. And the Miner Mag didn't break the story, but they have good follow-up reporting. TSMC cut off Bitmain co-founder's chip firm amid U.S. Huawei probe report. So basically, the idea here is that a Chinese chip company, Sophgo, which is linked to Bitmain co-founder McCree Zhan, is kind of coming in the scope of the U.S. Consumer Department. Basically, they're kind of collateral damage in this probe where TSMC has stopped shipping chips to Sophgo because the U.S. Consumer Department started investigating them and whether or not Sophgo supplied chips to Huawei, which has been subject to U.S. sanctions since 2020. So just to kind of follow that thread one more time, Sophgo is being accused of supplying chips to Huawei, which is sanctioned. So TSMC is no longer providing Sophgo chips, and people are worried that this is going to spill over into Bitmain somehow, and that Bitmain will then fall under either an investigation from a U.S. entity or be subject to sanctions similar to Huawei. Seems kind of far-fetched to me. Maybe there has been some funny business, and Bitmain has been involved with Huawei, like Sophgo has, and we don't even know if Sophgo did actually supply the chips. They're basically just being accused of that, or that's being investigated currently right now by U.S. officials. But it has not been proven, and so we don't even know if there's smoke. I mean, we don't even know if there's fire here or if there's even smoke, right? The other thing I would point out is obviously Bitmain, a Chinese company. Again, maybe there's some involvement here with sanctioned entities. There's nothing to suggest that at this point. But I think it's maybe important to note that all Bitmain machines are manufactured outside of China, in Malaysia. That's where the majority of their manufacturing capacity is. And all of the chips do come from Taiwan, which is not China, despite what Google Maps might want you to think. So that's kind of it there. I think that this is one of those stories where people get excited. It's like this geopolitical tensions kind of wrapped up in this. And Bitmain, obviously the biggest ASIC manufacturer, but there's nothing to suggest so far that they are in the sights of U.S. officials or that they're imminently to be sanctioned. There's just nothing there right now.
But my FUD, I think I have a few thoughts on this one. So there are two new Bitcoin mining ASIC developers coming to market right now, or have been in market, and they're really pushing hard on the "we are made in the USA" marketing. Now, I won't label them, but there's only a few out there, so I'm sure.
I mean, I'll label them. It's Auradine, and I assume you're talking about Block because Bitdeer's not. Can't claim to be right.
It's Auradine and Block, and like they're really pushing on the geopolitical risk factor to one way or the other. And I think it's a good play in terms of, hey, there's concerns there. TSMC is obviously in Taiwan, and that's came to very difficult position over the last 24 months at the end of the Biden administration. So, and who knows what happens with the Trump administration. And that's why they built the facility in Arizona, which we could have talked about as well, because they had their first yield results from that facility in Phoenix, and it was really, really good. But we can talk about that on another show. I do think like there is a reason for having that in your pitch deck as an ASIC manufacturer, being like, hey, we're
totally
building the US. That being said, like these things are being blown out of proportion. There's tons of FUD against Bitmain, tons of FUD against MicroBT, and it's just falls apart every time you sort of look into it. I heard of other rumors this week that are not really worth going into. They're interesting when you first hear about them, but they kind of fizzle a little bit once you go into it more. I think for this story itself, not too much more to go on it. I don't think that Bitmain is going to be slapped with a sanction, and I don't think that market's going to change anytime soon. They have a very deep and old relationship with TSMC, and to my understanding, have a very large allocation, and TSMC 100%. Likes that business. So
100%. And I think that if this were to actually result in sanctions, that would be short-term catastrophic for the Bitcoin mining market in the US. Basically, MicroBT just doesn't have the same capacity.
Yeah.
Those are really the only competitive machines currently. Auradine, I have heard from multiple miners, are very good and competitive, but they also are still very small, right? They're only manufacturing, I've heard, about 1,000 machines a month, or a few thousand machines a month. So if Bitmain were to get sanctioned, you would have complete stagnation of hash rate in the US.
Mining death spiral.
Yeah.
Interested in Bitcoin scaling, startups, or learning more about Bitcoin softworks? Join us Saturday, November 9th at the Fidelity Center in Boston, Massachusetts for Op Next, a one-day conference on scaling Bitcoin hosted by Blockspace Media, the producers of this podcast. Join Bitcoiners like Peter Todd, Portland Hodl, and more to discuss various Bitcoin proposals like OpCat, the Great Script Restoration, CTV, and more. Attend workshops, speaker sessions, and panels discussing the latest in scaling tech, from ZK to ARC to Bitcoin softwork history. And for a limited time, use code OCTOBER to get 25% off a general admission ticket. Find out more by visiting opnext.dev. Again, that's October at opnext.dev. You can find out more by checking out the show notes below.
Let's go to our last story, which I believe is the Cry Corner. Colin, we could have picked this other story as our Cry Corner.
Well, we still can. You can pivot. Is it better?
It's funny.
Oh, is it this? Yeah, you know what? Let's just do this one. We were going to do one about a professor and journalist in Knoxville, Tennessee, not getting a Freedom of Information Act fulfilled
this is
for
so funny.
TVA. But this is better. This is honestly better.
Do you want to give the pitch?
A Faketoshi 2.0.
Faketoshi.
Yeah, I honestly don't know much about this other than what I've seen populated on my Twitter feed this morning, but it seems like this man named Stephen Mola has taken basically saying that he's Satoshi. He's come out and saying that he invented Bitcoin. Why he's doing this now, only you, dear viewer, can guess or stipulate, but or assume. But yeah, I don't know. This is, people are gonna just make fun of this, and they already have. So yeah, they're comparing him to Craig Wright.
I'll give a little more scoop here. So Joe Tidy of BBC News went to go check this out. There was an event posting for X amount of dollars, like $1,000 a seat. You can come listen to Satoshi Nakamoto reveal himself, and looks like about 3-4 people showed up from the photo. They had like they had like plastic chairs put out for people to sit in, a stage with a screen. This guy got up there, declared that he was Satoshi, and his evidence for it was not to be revealed on that date, according to the video. But he just wanted everyone to know. He wanted to make the declaration that date, but he did not want to prove himself. People asked him to sign the keys to the Genesis coins. He said that he was not willing to at this time, very much like Craig Wright. And then he also declared a few other facts relating to his ownership and, I don't know, proving that he's Satoshi in some sort of way.
So wait, who organized this? I'm reading Joe Tidy's Twitter. I'm at London in an event billed as the unveiling of the true legal identity of Bitcoin inventor Satoshi Nakamoto. An odd setup to the press conference as the organizers asked me to pay 500 Great British pounds to attend and appear on stage to ask questions of the billionaire mystery man. I mean, it sounds like, did this guy just set this up himself? Like, I mean,
Mr. Mullah is explaining his background and says he is an economic and monetary scientist. He says he previously tried to out himself as Satoshi in 2016, but someone stopped him. Then again, by speaking to the BBC's @Ruskin147, who interviewed him but didn't publish a story. Wild. There's a few other things that are here are really funny. He says that he loves Bitcoin and loves that it's working, but he is unhappy with how the project has developed, and that's why he's reappearing. So I don't know what this is. To me, it seems like the many comings of like Jesus coming back and people pretending to be like the second coming of Christ. And now it's Satoshi. Now people are doing it Satoshi. So maybe we get more of this, you know?
I'm gonna tap the sign. The only way to prove it is signing a message from Satoshi's original public key and address. That's it, guys. That's the only way. So
that's the cry corner.
That's a good cry corner. I love BitMEX research in here. They're like, we're at this stupid event also.
Oh my gosh.
We are wasting our time at this ridiculous event also. The ubiquitous BitMEX research doing the Lord's work so you don't have to. So you don't have to fly to London and spend £500 on an event that's not worth your time.
Incredible. Okay, we will skip the TSMC story or the TVA story for this week. That was good. Thank you for listening to the Mining Pod. We will be back next week for a show with Chris Benedictson of CoinShares talking about the investable landscape for Bitcoin mining. So that's a very good show. And then we will be back after the election with more stock shows and news roundups. But enjoy your weekend, folks, before the craziness on Tuesday. Colin, see you later.
Stay sane, stay safe. We're recording this on Halloween, so happy belated Halloween.
Happy White Paper Day.
If you gave out almond joys like my wife intends to, shame on you. Kids don't want that. So
it's not that bad. It's like
it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
It could be better. It could be better.
But anyway, thanks for tuning in, y'all. Everyone have a good weekend and just stay sane and safe next week. Just go do something good for yourself.
Peace.